And I think we're live. Let me see here. Welcome to Bigfoot
and the Bunny.
This is a couple's journey into the mysterious,
the unknown, and the paranormal.
I'm your host, Chris Carr.
And I'm your host, Kristen Johnson.
Together we are Bigfoot and the Bunny. Welcome to Bigfoot and the Bunny. Happy Saturday, folks.
Happy Saturday.
Oh, I've lost my hat. I'm Chris Carr.
And I'm Kristen Johnson.
And how are you? Happy Disclosure Day. Today, the government, United States government, released the disclosure documents for the UAP sightings that we've all been watching in the news. And we got our appropriate hats on, right, Chris?
Yes, we do. Well, you did. Our little tinfoil hats.
I didn't go for a proper fitting of my hat.
No, he would not.
And as it turned out, and we're not very surprised, there wasn't a whole lot of information in the press releases and documentation that was released by our government.
Right.
We kind of predicted this. I think Lou Elizondo told us pretty much everything we need to know, but in the documentation, they of course said more investment is needed, which I did predict would be a big part of it. And they filed pretty much all the unexplained phenomena as other. So
what is other? Well,
so if we look a little wackadoodle with these tinfoil hats, I didn't come across a news story. There's apparently a convention going on this weekend in Springfield, Missouri, for people who don't believe in birds.
Now, we've never heard this before. Being in the realm, this is the first time we've heard of it, and it's called the No Birds Movement. And what they think is that the history actually started. We don't know a lot about it. We haven't researched it because we just found out.
Correct.
But it started in 1947 of all.
Yeah.
And
within the CIA or something, right?
Yes.
And so the theory kind of is, I'm sorry, is that the birds were killed off, I believe, by the government, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And replaced with drones.
Yeah. Even their bird poop.
Even their bird poop is like some kind of tracking device or something. And I think the rationalization for this is that birds can sit on power lines. I'm not sure, but the No Bird Movement is a real thing. And I feel pretty good wearing this tinfoil hat.
I do too right now.
So we've got a great guest for you. We're going to bring him right on. His name is Dr. Terje Simonsen, and he's going to discuss his research and philosophy of the paranormal going back to ancient times. He notes that while there is nearly 150 years of scientific research in parapsychology, the field is still marginalized within academia. And this is true. He will also talk about his responses to the paranormal. Within the field of theoretical physics, he focuses on the practical applications of psi and the personal meaning of psi abilities. So get ready. It's going to be really interesting. Let's bring him on. Hey there.
Hi. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you.
Hello. You're in Norway, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I'm in south Norway, a little town called Mandal.
Oh, that's excellent. That's excellent. And I'm sure it's quite a bit later where you are than it is here. So we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
Oh, just nice to be on. So no problem.
Excellent.
We should take our hats off now.
All right. We're going to remove our hats because it might be silly to be talking to people in tinfoil hats for 2 hours. So let me do this. That's going to mess up my hair.
Ah, you're fine.
Terry, Terje, do you believe in birds?
I'm quite convinced about the ontological existence of birds. My father was a biologist, and one of his, the theme for his doctorate was social organization among crows. And he did not think that social organization came about because of government. So, yeah.
So birds are real, at least in Norway.
They are very real, and the poo are also real. And I've checked; there's no listening device inside. So
Thank you for that.
yeah.
Yes, thank you.
So.
So, what is your background? How personal and study wise?
Start study-wise then. I'm a historian of ideas, and I've specialized in esoteric and occult traditions. And I've written earlier about the Book of Enoch, which is a esoteric text from antiquity, important both for Christianity and for Judaism and for esotericism of different kinds, and also written about I and Thou, the main work by the Jewish philosopher of dialogue called Martin Buber, and his came from this Eastern Judaism, the tradition called Hasidic tradition, and they in turn are based on what is called a certain version of the Kabbalah, the Jewish mysticism. So, and also I've written about anthroposophy, which is say the version of theosophy from the Austrian occult and esoteric teacher Rudolf Steiner, which many will be familiar with from the Steiner schools or Waldorf schools and different kind of eco-dynamic movement in growing vegetables and that kind of stuff. So and I had, as a mentor at the university, I had probably Norway's foremost expert on these kind of things, Professor Jan Erik Ebbestad Hansen, and he has more than 100 publications in this field. And he said you should write about this field because it's not covered yet, this anthroposophical field in Norway, and so I did. So yes, so that is say my scholarly. Say approach to this field, and personally it. Both my family and also some trusted friends in a Christian youth club I was member of have, say when I was a kid, told me about strange stories about telepathy and knowing things in advance and that kind of things. And these were people I trusted, so I had no really reason to doubt them. And when I was become say a bit more grown up, then I checked out with a couple of Gypsy or Roma people having these abilities or claim to have these abilities, and much bogus, but also something very real. And after Norway's greatest, or not greatest, but say most serious daily newspaper, Aftenposten, ran a series about psychics, they were not impressed mostly, but there was one guy that impressed them really. So I checked with him, and I was going to a date the day after. So I asked him, how will this psychic, how will this date go? And he said, yes, she likes you quite a lot, and it will be very nice. And so, and then he ended his statement with saying, and I can tell you, this woman is 1 meter and 64 centimeters tall. So during this, yes, quite impressive level of precision there. So I went to this date and it became nice and so, and I couldn't keep myself back, of course. So I just casually remarked, by the way, how tall are you? And then she said, 1 meter and 64 centimeters. So that was very impressive. Yes. And I had to call him next day and ask, how did you do that? And he explained when asked him about certain things, it was almost like putting a search word in Google, and there will appear lots and lots of information, more or less, say, well related to the theme. But he had no control what will come doing such a search, but he had just to be receptive and take what came. And also then I said, okay, it seems so you can also read my mind then. I was quite fresh in this game then, and said, yes, if you are a good channeler. And I didn't know how to approach that, but I said, okay, but that now I will visualize my house. And my house is quite big, old white house, and in the middle of it, it's a blue big door, a double door. So when you see it from a front, you will see this big white wall, and right in the middle, this, say, what is called indigo blue double door. So, and he was at the Canary Islands on holiday then. We are just speaking on the phone, and I challenged him and said, "No, I will visualize the front of my house, and please tell me, what do you see?" And he became silent for a few seconds, and then he said, "I think I see some white, and now I see something blue." And there is not a very common combination with this. The little town I live in, it's a long story this, but we have a tradition for green doors. So it's very few doors in our town are blue, in fact. So if he had been a kind of wise guy, smart ass, to choose my language, he would have listened to my dialect and say, "Aha, he come from that district. I've heard that they have some typically green doors there." Or he could, go to the internet and something and checked. So I was quite impressed that first he gave on the centimeter the correct height of this woman I was dating, and then he just like that out of the air could describe, as I perceived it at least, the colors of my house. So after that, I thought, this is serious. I have to do some research, and then I went into parapsychology as well, which I had not studied at the university. They have two places in Sweden where they have parapsychology at the university, but no place in Norway. So then I did say, in addition to this academic research I did in other fields, I started on my own doing this parapsychological research. So long story short, then my mother passed away. I became kind of depressed. I had to take some time off the normal, circuit. And a friend of mine who is a very experienced psychotherapist said, I discussed this theme with him, and he said, "You should really write about this." And I said, "Why?" "Yeah, it will be helpful for many people, because many people have these experiences, but they do not have a constructive frame to interpret them." And he, as a psychotherapist, people coming and telling about the uncle dying in one town, and they suddenly feeling a pain in the chest at the same second in another town, and then he has to say, "Oh, that was a strange coincidence," But over the years, when these kind of strange coincidences become plentiful, then he, for his part, is convinced it's not just coincidence. There's real communication going on, telepathic communication. But as you do not have a model or a framework to interpret this phenomena that can give meaning and make them somehow understandable or rational, then you have to resort to psychosis or coincidence or trauma or whatever, So he said, give people a constructive frame to interpret their paranormal experiences, and so I did. So that is the background for this book, which I have here, and which is called A Short History of Nearly Everything Paranormal.
Yes, it is, and that's quite a tome you've got there.
It's only 500 pages.
That's all.
But in fact, it has. No, I will also allow myself to do a little, advertising for it, because it has won 2 awards in the US. One from the Parapsychological Association, which is quite prestigious, really, and also quite recently it won a Silver Nautilus Award, and that is an award that was given to the Dalai Lama 2 years ago. So I'm quite proud of that.
Wow.
Yeah. Excellent. Wow, that's really
That's
cool.
amazing.
Yeah,
Namaste.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, you covered a lot of ground just there in describing how you got your start. And some of the things you mentioned there were like Enochian, which is like John Dee, if I'm not mistaken, and the angelic language, and it's a mystical, magical.
John Dee is very fascinating.
Right. Yeah, he's a totally fascinating guy. Also, Hebrew mysticism and Kabbalah. Those are subjects that are generally considered to be magic. Now, do you see a tie-in between magic and psi abilities?
Yes, of course. What is the crux of the whole thing, as I see it, is what we could call there's an expression taken from Larry Dossey, non-local mind. By convention, by routine thinking inside the box, we think that consciousness is something that I have inside my head and you have inside your head. But basically, I use the metaphor, the mental internet. I think consciousness is more like a collective field, the connecting us all, that we are linked up to, and we can send telepathic emails, and we can make clairvoyant downloads from that vast field of information. So if you think of all these activities as more or less operating within the collective field of consciousness, I think you're say on the right track. There are many traditions for how to deal with this field, because even if it's a kind of new thought that seemed to be supported by at least some branches of quantum physics, is a very old thought. If you go back to the Indian Vedanta philosophy 3,000 years before Christ, you have this say view of consciousness as a ubiquitous thing. It's more or less thought of being the, say, basic stuff of the universe.
We agree.
Sure.
with
And
that.
I know of the, and I forget the gentleman's name who started the research study, but we have clocks around the world that basically go yes, no, ones or zeros. I forget the name. I don't know if it's binary clock, but they'll change different ways based on kind of how the collective consciousness is feeling.
That's the Princeton Global Consciousness Project.
Princeton. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
My pleasure.
I need the book.
You definitely need a book.
I think I'll be got a pretty good collection of books back there, and I would like to see it on that bookshelf, actually.
Yes.
From everything I've seen, it looks like an amazing book, and I'm glad to hear about those rewards. That's awesome.
What I have tried to do is say because typically for this field, as you have this believe all and believe nothing, and I feel that's derailments, both of them. You are having in one ditch or in the other ditch, all respect for the persons involved, but you just mentioned this no bird movement, or what you call them.
No bird. Yeah. No bird
so
movement.
for me that sounds like a kind of conspiracy theory, and have not I do not believe in that. On the other hand, you have these skeptic people, that they wouldn't believe a ghost even if it stood right in front of them, so
Very true.
and this say scientism, which is very reductionist somehow, because they have a model of what is science, and then they try to reduce the totality of our world to their model, and then you lose out so many aspects of reality. So from this believe all and believe nothing thing, I try to go up the golden way, in a golden road in the middle, and I seem to have succeeded quite well in that, because some skeptics like my book, and also lots of what I call the great parapsychologists, like Dean Radin, for instance, Stanley Krippner, Stefan Schwartz, Jeffrey Mishlove, and all these great guys. Yes. So as they have somehow endorsed my book, people can go to the Amazon website and find it there. I feel somehow I've succeeded in my task, which was to somehow make it accessible, an accessible introduction to this quite complicated and a field where there's much please excuse my English, everybody.
Okay.
Unsubstantiated claims, and also much unfounded skepticism. So
That's right. You mentioned Jeffrey Mishlove. We love his show.
He is great. He's great.
He is
great.
Wonderful.
And, very intelligent. I love what he's doing. He's is helping to bridge some of those gaps. But I think it's still probably a little, quote, heady for, say, some of the ghost hunting people, right? And it's a term I hate, but they may not be. They don't necessarily get the parapsychology. So that's wonderful to put some kind of bridge in between that. To bring it together, because they are related, and it's a lot of our own studies. We're very into people like Dean Radin and his works, and parapsychology in general. And psi, we had Dr. Joel Gallenberger on not too long ago. It's fascinating, how he can walk into a casino and change the odds with his mind, and do this on a consistent basis, and take groups of people with him and do that. So we completely believe in that. Into psi, and I think it is all related, and we got the other end of like UAPs and this quote unquote alien phenomena. I personally think they're already here. They're not really from up there,
interdimensional.
But you get into that, and some of those researchers talk about things called contact modalities, and they're tying things like paranormal events and UAP events back with remote viewing, which I think is more or less what you were mentioning when you said about
yes.
the house and the blue house. And
Chapter 2 in my book is more or less fully dedicated to the remote viewing project that the government in the US run between, say, about 1975 to 1995, the so-called Project Stargate. So that's a very exciting project, and also Dean Radin was part of that project. So there's lots of serious researchers working there, and lots of also physicists from Berkeley, California, have worked on that project. So that is a highly interesting thing to delve into.
I would totally
Absolutely.
agree. Kristen and I take remote viewing classes, and we're very fascinated with it. And when you hit that target and you're close, it's like, where did this come from? Right? You're looking at it, all you've got is a number,
right?
And there it is.
A description or something.
Yes.
Turn it in. Wow.
I have had experiences of that kind myself also. But if you say view consciousness as a collective field that we all share, so we can just say the information is there already on the net. It's just becoming a bit more sensitive and being able to download it. So to improve your search engine on the mental internet, to put it that way.
Download is an interesting word.
Yeah,
that's what a lot of experiencers say. They call them downloaders, or they receive downloads. As if they receive them from this external consciousness, they can receive a certain amount of information that maybe tells them how things work, on the other side, or a lot of times they feel like their psychic abilities are enhanced.
That is an say common experience. This I also wrote about anthropology and the Kalahari Bushmen, and they have a tradition to enter what they call classroom, and because they have not a written culture, they have an oral culture and, as it seems, a telepathical culture. A great American psychologist, you might know him, Bradford Keeney. He was professor in Louisiana. I think he's written about 20 books about psychology. He is also a shaman in their tradition. And he said that it's like, say, entering a classroom and downloading all the experiences from their ancestors, how to do, say, bead work, and how to, say, which medical plants will work for that illness and that kind of things. So they have it there. So, as I said, the Bushmen are pioneers in web-based education. So.
That's so interesting.
It is. And also, it's a long story, this, but I also, as I said, studied occultism, and there's a great, many of the occult traditions, they are power hungry, and I don't like that, because somehow it's also a derailment ethically. Buddhism generally has a much more, say, healthy and sound approach there, because they say all paranormal abilities are subordinated to you being an ethical person with other persons, but there are some nice, say, occult organizations also, and you might know this Servants of the Light tradition, which is an offspring of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And they have one of their, say, great teachers is William Ernest Butler, and he's written quite good books about clairvoyance. And he also describes this before the internet, so he didn't use the download metaphor, but it's kind of the experiences when you open a bag and suddenly you see this, and you have, say, you're going to the gym, and there's a towel, and there's the soap, and there's your trainers, and everything, So it's like opening a bag, and so it's how to unzip that bag, That is what you are learning, I think, in this remote viewing class.
Excellent. Yeah, I feel like all these things are definitely related. And these abilities, astral projection, telekinesis, these psi abilities, and they're directly related to the paranormal. But I guess I would ask for the listeners, what is a ghost to you?
Me? That's interesting. If I will not say I'm an expert on this, but if you go into I can continue with this William Ernest Butler. He divides a ghost in three types, basically. One is, say, disincarnated spirits, people that have died, but mostly not being aware that they are dead somehow, and therefore is being held back in some sense in the material world. And the other thing is, which I think is most common, is really that the room, if for instance, a friend of mine, he is a healer, and he was visiting a hotel here in Norway, and in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the night, he suddenly awoke, and there was a fight going on at the floor. And he saw these two people fighting, and it ended with one killing the other. And so he was quite perturbed by that, And they asked him when he checked out from the hotel the next morning. They asked, "Did you sleep well?" So he said, "Well, yeah, mostly, but there was this performance I get to witness in the middle of the night." And then the clerk said, "You've seen it, you too." So then probably there has been, say, 50 years or so, have been happening a murder in this room, and the impressions still are somehow just like an old tape recorder. We have tape recording the music and the film. It seems it seems that matter has the ability to save impression from what has happened earlier. But of course, but that doesn't mean that this murder happened every night and every night and every night. It's just kind of loop going on repeat. And if you're sensitive, you see that loop going on.
It's a residual, I believe that we call that residual energy.
Residual haunting.
So as I said, the first thing is that there might be the consciousness, the spirit, the soul of a deceased person that has not left the building yet. But there, in most cases, I think it's impression that are recorded in the walls of that specific place. So that's just the two things. The third thing, also, if we think of this field, as I said, the collective consciousness, you have also, like in the sea, you have flotsam, things drifting around. Also in the collective field, there are things drifting around, and it seems to be somehow, I don't have a full overview over that, but it seems to be related to the phases of the moon. Then when it's full moon, it's more activity. Then you can say it's flow, and the moon is, becoming smaller, then it's ebb in a way. So it seems when it's a large activity in the collective field of consciousness, these phenomena, ghost phenomena, tend to happen more often. So it can be some kind of flotsam from the collective sea of consciousness also. So that is at least 3 approaches possible to gauge. There are several also, but that is what I think it's the main good approaches to the theme.
What use can the paranormal have for our daily lives?
I think it can be extremely useful to make better decisions, because I write in my book, chapter 9, about intuition. And some people, the skeptical, believe nothing people, they say intuition is just a storehouse of experience, which in my case, of course, is true if you are an experienced driver. You come in a traffic jam, and just by intuition, you make the right moves with the wheel and the gear and the gas. So that is one way of, but as I make a point of in my book, I think our, say, normal intuition can be fortified with information from the collective field, so that you will know things that is not possible. If you're going to buy a house, for instance, and suddenly get a feeling that what is called the salesman is not telling you everything you need to know. That could be a clairvoyant hunch about thing, or if you get kind of a bad feeling about something, a meeting or whatever, of course you have to know yourself, and if you have a tendency to project things into situation, you must arrest yourself and see, it could be only me. But you also, I think, should be open to this could be real information. I have heard so many stories about people, avoiding that car and this, say, this bus, and it crashed later, and that kind of things, So who should you hang out with? Who should you, say, become a couple with or move in with? Which jobs should you apply for? in all such, say, day-to-day but very important, say, decisions, trained intuition, which is fortified on steroids with,
Right.
yes, with say, paranormal information, I think can be very helpful. And there is this spiritual, I think she's Canadian, Sonia Choquette. I will not do ad for her books because she is so famous already, but she made one title many years ago. It's called Trust Your Vibes. And she had interviewed, I think, lots of Fortune 500 CEOs, and quite a lot of them said that intuition was their main, say, the main explanation why they had succeeded. Because when you have a diffuse mass of information, and how it's impossible to really know every, say, possible track further from that situation, to grasp the totality of the situation, then you need intuition. And as I said, the paranormal fortified intuition will give you, and I think very many people use this, but they do not know that they are using.
Yeah, they're not.
Absolutely.
Artists, sports people, you know, the extreme timing, and also to make the right business decision, for instance, as these Fortune 500 bosses do, I think, more often than, say, unsuccessful people than in this field. So I think it can be very helpful for the private lives and improve your quality of life. And it's also the philosophical aspect of it. No, I'm talking about, so just stop me. It's give also a kind of, for me at least, a good feeling to feel connected with everybody else, you know, that we are part of a big network. I'm not just alone, lost inside my head, you know. I'm part of this big mental web. And it's also an ethical aspect of that, because if the other person is kind of, we are part of the same unity of consciousness, it's difficult to treat other persons bad, really, because you somehow directly feel that me and this other person, we are one at some level, you know. So that is also, yes, so that's a great ethical, say, what is called impetus coming from knowing about this, say, what I call, say, true paranormal approach, not about denying the existence of birds, but knowing about the collective field of consciousness.
It's basically clairsentient.
Excuse me?
Clairsentient. You always go with your gut feelings.
Yes. The clairvoyance voyance is, of course, French, and use it's related to the eyes vision. But as you say, clairsentient and clairaudient and clear olfactory, you know, all the body's senses can be really fortified by, say, use of, say, the paranormal intuition. But some people take it via their ears, and some by the sight, and some by the gut feeling, you know. So
exactly, always go with your gut.
Yes, exactly. So you have, and the interesting thing is also you have to learn how your own language is here, because just as some musicians, they play like that, and other musicians play like that, you know. I have interviewed close to 100 professional psychics in many countries: Norwegian, Sami, Jamaica, Canadian, Indian, Native Americans, you know, and I see they have a very, say, different way of relating to open for this information. And I asked lots of questions about this also. And what I have extracted for this is that you have a personal, say, code. You have to learn, what does this say, figure or impression or color or sensation mean for me? For instance, most healers, they will be experienced at having warm hands, when some other in fact say that healing, no, that's then shading into a kind of strange chill, a cold perception, you know. And also some say that if you ask about the result of exam and you get a picture and the picture comes in blue, that will mean the real outcome. If the picture comes red, it will be you, say, hopes and fears about the outcome. So you have to really know yourself in an extended way to operate in a good way with this. And that's like knowing your balance on a bike, for instance. It's impossible to explain. You have just to, what is keeping balance on a bike? So to learn this, and you will I also give some practical exercises how you can train yourself in using this.
You would need to practice, and we know that from remote viewing and also doing readings. A lot of times it's symbolism. I think is what you're saying, is that you'll get these symbols, and the symbols, by themselves may not really be directly related, but it may mean something to you or the other person. Where when you look at it back later, go, oh, look at that. That actually does fit. It was symbolic.
Exactly.
And how it works.
Exactly. And there you have to put
Images.
in the work, really. Of course, you have to have some talent. I think we all, because we are sentient beings and thinking beings, we are connected with this collective field of consciousness. But we have to somehow, just like, as I said, musicians, you have to practice and make mistakes and learn from your mistakes and improve, until you get a better player in this field.
And there is that high level functioning. You mentioned musicians and athletes.
Yes.
You can reach a state where you're no longer thinking,
Yes.
right? Being a musician in a form of life and using improvisation to just determine what those notes were. It's almost like it comes from somewhere else.
Yes.
People also mention this in songwriting, like people like Paul McCartney and Tori Amos, attributed a library of songs to fairies. Like,
yeah, right.
She didn't make them, right? They just came, they were given to her. And
Yes.
I think that's really interesting. And I think what you're saying it's connected to that mental network, the collective consciousness.
I totally agree.
Painters and artists as well.
Yeah, they have, as the listeners or viewers might be interested to know, they did some years ago, they did research on Juilliard's School of Music, which is very excellent, as many probably know, excellent music school. And they have run psi test with the students there. And because they are, say, more than average, gifted with musical abilities, and they also scored quite a lot higher than average persons on psi tests, being sensitive to telepathy and clairvoyance and these kind of things. So there is a connection here, and use intuition, because intuition it's irrational, but it's also emotional, and it's also artistically, and many artists will appeal to intuition. So intuition is really crux word here, how to deal with this field.
Do you feel like that's a stepping stone to the other abilities that people can manifest within themselves?
Definitely, because because intuition is a good place to start, because you feel a bit bad about some people and you feel good about others, and could be about places. So somehow the definition of intuition I use in my book is the feeling of knowing, but without knowing how you know. And that is very common to more or less everybody, I think. So that is an excellent starting point. And then you can develop that into, say, knowing things that you could not have any normal way of knowing. A friend of you living in Australia, how could you know that he's just having a divorce, for instance, and that kind of things. So starting with, say, the normal intuition and working it out to cover more and more of the collective field, I think that's a possible way to go for many people, at least.
Aleister Crowley, I know he was quoted as saying he could walk behind a man, like walk in his footsteps behind him in a street, and match his steps and make himself kind of start to fall and cause the person in front of him to fall on the ground.
Yes.
Do you think, was he crazy? Did he really do these things?
I probably think he did, but I think I don't like Aleister Crowley because he's an egomaniac. So was an egomaniac, yes. And the power play, and always being self-important and calling himself the most evil man in the universe, and being the beast 666 and the revelation of John and all that stuff. This is what makes me so angry, because they give esotericism a bad name. You should go to the Buddhist masters, to the Christian mystics, the Sufi masters, and all those using these powers for good, for healing, for advising, and all that. So that is, of course, he's kind of fascinating. I read quite a lot about Crowley, and I will not say a friend, but an acquaintance of mine is a great, he was a master of this Ordo Templi Orientis, which is kind of Crowleyan, not dark lodge, but a very grey lodge.
His mystery school,
Yes, and many of the Norwegian, this black metal milieu in Norway, they burned down quite a number of churches some years ago.
Which is horrifying.
Yes, and they were inspired by this kind, and I know this, and he did not have any respect for me, but then we played chess and I beat him 7 times in a row, and then he respected me.
There you go.
Awesome.
Because Crowley was supposedly a great chess player. So if you are really a Crowley, you should also be a great chess player, you know. So it's fascinating, and probably he can do this, but why should he? As I said, if you're a musician, of course you can have some groupies and you do your power play with them and make them do things, take drugs and be group sex and whatever, if that's what you want to. But that is not how you should use your life, really. So I feel, that, as I said, the Buddhist masters much more to emulate than Crowley.
Yeah, that way is very selfish, for
Yes.
sure. Do you think this also relates to things like Dean Radin's work on torsion energies? I know he did a study where he measured skin and how the skin reacted before they would show a person an image that was either very positive or very negative,
Yes.
maybe even traumatic looking, and the skin changes just before the person actually sees the image.
Right.
So you know, like a millisecond. I don't know what the time frame was, but it's very small.
Usually, yeah, but it's more than that. It's on average about 3 seconds.
Okay, and
Yes.
it's theorized that this torsion energies may be a force, you know, in the universe that we're not familiar with, like electromagnetism, you know, or gravity, or something that really hasn't been defined, that might be responsible for some of the psychic phenomena in psi work that people are seeing and witnessing.
Yes, that's probably true. I'm getting a couple of tracks to follow here. Just to say, before we're leaving this Crowley thing, I think what he is doing somehow, it's projecting a mental image. And if you follow, say, the body language of another person, and I think it's a kind of, you project a telepathic image of sinking, you know, and if that image is projected strong enough into another person's consciousness, especially if he's not on guard, you know, if a person is on guard, it's much more difficult to manipulate. But Crowley was walking behind this person, you know, tuning into his movement, you know, probably then sending the telepathic thing sink, you know, and I think it's that how he did that trick. I have no reason to believe he did not do it, but as I said, I'm not very impressed by it, really. But generally, the psi is divided typically into ESP, extrasensory perception, and PK, psychokinesis. And the first is about transfer of information, and the second is about transfer of energy. So I think it's at least deep down, it perhaps energy and information is really the same thing. That is probably true. But for all practical purposes, I think it's very practically say useful and heuristic say good to divide between PK and ESP. As I said, PK about the physical, the force aspect of these things, and ESP, which is the information aspect of these things. In my book, I write mostly about the information, the telepathy, clairvoyance, and precognition, knowing the future. The PK thing would be telekinesis, moving objects at a distant, bending spoons, and that kind of things, and also healing, for instance. So what Radin has researched on many phenomena, so I don't know what I should say is, but this screen experiments you mentioned, that is what I would say is precognition, which is ESP. It's information, knowing information about something before it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a natural reaction. These people weren't necessarily trying to predict what they were going to see, but
Exactly.
their physical body reacted to the imagery before it was presented to their eyes.
Exactly.
So, and I find that fascinating.
Very fascinating, and Radin also ran that experiment with Kary Mullis, who is a Nobel laureate in chemistry, and he confirmed that this is real. He writes, "I was able to see 3 seconds into the future. It shouldn't be possible, but I did it. There's much about consciousness and time we do not know." Yet he has confirmed that, and I write also about that experiment in my book.
Excellent. And I just want to say a little hello to some of the people out there watching us tonight. We see Anne Marie Young. She says, "Nobody better touch my birds." We love Anne.
Yes.
Robert Honing's another good friend of ours. Greetings, my friends. So got some folks out there, and if you guys have any questions for Terje, just let us know. We'll put them up on the screen. We appreciate it. I think a lot of people went to the beach today. It's very hot, and
Yes.
as you can probably tell, as Kristen and I are
I'm
sitting here
melting. My makeup's
sweating
melting
and
off. And
her makeup's melting, and I look like I just ran a mile. But yeah, that's all good. Let us know what you got. This is a fascinating conversation, and I love it. Thank you again for taking the time to talk to us. I really appreciate it.
Okay, and if I talk too much, you must stop me because
no, please do.
Oh no, please.
Notorious.
It's fascinating.
Notorious. Yeah. No, I agree with you, and I agree with you about Crowley too. You know, you have to wonder though, like a person like that who desires the media attention. He wants people to focus on him, and this relates to so many other things, not limited to the UAPs or maybe even the bird people. If you think about something, you're kind of lending it an energy. You know, and I would think it would take a good deal of energy just for that silly thing that was known to do, walk behind somebody and make them fall over and you say sink. You know, it would take a good deal of psi ability to send somebody to the ground like that. I wonder if being in the media spotlight like that gave him energy, almost
I think he worked as a. I make this statement with this perhaps a bit too bold, but you know, it's again back to this W. Ernest Butler said he also written a book about, or at least chapters in a book about psychic vampires. You know, and somehow if you you can see about the people around Crowley, you know, it's not healthy. You know, you feel it's a bad vibes around there, and I think somehow he sucked energy about. You know, he has also made his. You know, let's call this.
His fangs.
Yes, his fangs, you know, with a kind of mechanism, he had made them sharper, you know, to give the snake's kiss, you know, biting the people in the neck, you know, and that's his vampirized and it's sucking the blood out of them. So, you know, all this mythology, it's the unhealthy thing of the paranormal, you know, and of course it's fascinating, like every kind of horror story. But if you are into personal development and really understanding these matters, I think it's not the way to go at all.
I agree with you. I mean, we're into spooky things, as you can see.
Yeah.
You know, we've got all kinds of creepy stuff. There's a Ouija board back there, and there's a painting my daughter made there, kind of a Van Gogh modified.
10 packs of tarot cards behind me and 2 crystal balls.
Oh yeah, that's some tarot.
Wow.
I think I have the Crowley cards back there. In fact,
I have 3 versions of Crowley cards. So.
Oh, nice! I got the green box.
But for instance, in Norway, our most famous psychic, he died about 1 week ago, and I write quite a lot about him. And he was much more powerful than the Crowley ever will become. But he used his forces for good and get so many demonstrations, mostly healing, but also clairvoyance, and found lost people for the police and for the Red Cross several occasions, and confirmed cases by the police and by the Red Cross, really. And also we had another guy, he died some years ago, so quite a number of years ago, but his name was Marcello Haugen, and he could also do the kind of tricks that Crowley did. You know, he could stop people, but that was when he didn't want to visit us. People tried to, you know, enter his property, but they were not able to come in because, so using, they had the same abilities, but used them for good. Marcello helped people for free for 30 years, never taking money for any people. And also the Snorsaman, the guy died last week. He did the same, and he even get the king's what is called a medal in silver for his unselfish activities. You know, so as I said, use the power to help people and advise them and heal them if you can. And
Sure. I know Uri Geller did a lot of charity work.
Yes. And also a good guy I like quite a lot. I quote Uri a bit in my book. I've mailed a kind of funny story I described in our exchange. And also a friend of mine was doing interview with Uri some years ago, and his son had taken a spoon from the cupboard before the interview, so it was not a trick spoon. And after the interview, the son of my friend gave this spoon to Uri, and he stroked it and gave it back. And while the son was holding the spoon, then it started to bend. So quite
Oh,
cool.
wow.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Wow.
also Matthew Manning, English healer, he was doing exactly the same thing and as Yuri when he was younger, and also lots of poltergeist beds moving around, and
Mhm.
cutlery flying from the shelf every day, so lots of heavy poltergeist effects. But after he started doing healing, more or less everything else of this chaotic phenomena disappeared. So you have the force, and it can come out as chaos, but it also as, say, healing and advising. So Matthew Manning has great respect for him. He suffered he had some alcoholism and many years, but he is now cured and doing wonderful healing work.
That's
That's
excellent.
great.
Fantastic.
Mm.
Yeah. Sometimes our own demons are the hardest demons to get rid of, right?
Please repeat. I didn't.
I said
Get
sometimes our own demons are the
Yes.
hardest demons to banish.
Exactly. And he told, because of all this poltergeist, he didn't really have say sound adolescence, And when he was grown up, he was more or less behaving like a teenager, just fooling around and drinking and using cocaine and everything. But after some years with that, he got a grip really, and I know he's, as I said, doing wonderful work. So.
Well, that's great. And speaking of that, I was curious what your thoughts are on banishings or house cleansings and
Oh,
things
it's.
of that nature. When people feel like they're haunted or they're having poltergeist activity that
Mm,
they may or may not be manifesting themselves, what
mm.
are some of the methods or methodologies you think would work best to get rid of them?
Interesting thing in Germany. I don't know if you know. But he's not. We are in the Anglosphere, so we're speaking English and reading the English book and so. But in Germany, they have a great professor in psychology and physics. His name is Walter von Lucadou, and he was connected to the university in Freiburg in Germany, and he had a poltergeist office. So if people had problems with poltergeist, they could come to him. Because if you have lots of destruction in your home and you go to the insurance company and say it was not me, it was not our party, it was the
Yeah, they're
poltergeist,
not going to believe anything you
they
say.
are going to believe it.
Liz
But
lady.
if Professor Walter von Lucadou at the University of Freiburg with 2 doctorate diplomas comes and says the same things, they are more likely to listen. So he had for 20 years, he was supported by the local government for doing this work, for helping people with poltergeist. And he's got a quite, say, rational approach. He very often thinks that poltergeist is the person, there is a conflicted person making, say, psychokinetic manifestations there. He took an example. There was a woman, and she had suffered, she was in a bad relationship, and she was extremely jealous. And the poltergeist manifested as flames striking from different places in the room, and that happened over a longer period. And it seemed in a way banal, but Lucadou diagnosed that as kind of burning jealousy that manifested. Yeah, so that is somehow, it's kind of a language again where your psyche manifests as chaos. It's what, help me with this word, make thing exteriorization.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
realizing in reality.
Mm.
And I know this
Yes.
is often said of like hormonal teenagers can
Yes,
bring about
typically.
hope.
And this English healer, Matthew Manning, he was a teenager with this when this extremely chaotic phenomenon happened. So it's more like it's usually not a spirit you have to ban there. It's more like this adolescent with lots of problems have to, say, get some therapy or go on vacation and get a bit more harmony in life. That will usually be sufficient. That said, as this story I told you about this healer friend of mine who had seen this murder or fight and murder in the hotel in the middle of the night, there probably it's not as a person doing that. It's more impressions still sitting in the wall. Then I think it could be a very good idea to get a kind of good psychic coming there and doing a kind of, say, banishing ritual. When I moved into a flat in Oslo many years ago, a flat that I still somehow control in a way, then I had a good psychic to go through every room, and doing his thing to somehow cleanse the energy in the different rooms from old impressions. And that is also, if you go to Latin America, for instance, it's quite normal that you get a Catholic priest to go through the rooms if you take over a house where people have been living before you. So I think that can be a good thing to do. And you can also do it yourself. Intention is really the power behind these effects, I think, mainly. But of course, if it's an experienced priest or an experienced clairvoyant psychic, that could be more efficient, perhaps, than your own rituals.
Fascinating.
We talk about attention a lot. That's
Mm.
basically how.
Yeah, intention being the crux of things like witchcraft or other things as well. People put it out there. Now, what is always a puzzling thing, and maybe isn't looked at on a serious level, is like, what is that intention doing? Is it coming from one's own consciousness? Are we making an impression on that collective consciousness, or are we making an impression on, say, otherworldly beings or entities, right?
And theoretically speaking, it's very difficult, of course, where is an intention coming from. But what you can observe is your intention and see which direction it takes, and whether or not somehow it's a kind of, perhaps it's just something you learned from your father. You have to become a businessman while you wanted to become an artist or whatever, So we have to listen carefully to somehow what is called tune into, because there might be deeper layers in your intention that you don't immediately find. Very often, I think you've typically a burned out businessman, for instance, suddenly he feel his intention was perhaps to make success first, but then he get a redefined conception what is success, and then his intention takes another direction. So I also have some education within Gestalt therapy, and what our teacher there told us, that is training of awareness. That is really so also for your intention, you have to somehow become more and more aware of the direction of things and listen very carefully. And just as a violinist have to be very nuanced where to place his or her fingers to make a beautiful tone. So also your intention somehow, it's kind of say raw material before you deal with it actively and consciously. So that is what I like about the Buddhist tradition also, that somehow you have to calibrate your intention and intuition and listen very carefully both to your body and to other people, So it's really work to do here, but it's rewarding, I think.
That's Gestalt therapy. That's what you call it?
Yes.
Fascinating.
The Norwegian Institute of Gestalt Therapy, they have two traditions, basically. I will, people are probably not interested in it, but they use this classical Gestalt therapy from Esal and Fritz Perls, but they also have the psychosynthesis, which is from the Roberto Assagioli. He was Italian psychiatrist in the tradition. Basically, he was Freudian, but he also studied all the esoteric traditions, the Kabbalah, Hermetism, and all that kind of things. So the Norwegian tradition of Gestalt is somehow a bit open to, say, the spiritual aspect as well.
Excellent. Excellent.
Excuse me.
Do you think, what do you think about there's mediums, obviously, of various qualities claiming to contact the dead. Can one eventually discern between people who have abilities and who are faking it, for lack of a better way?
I was present at the opening of the first spiritualist church in Norway some years ago, and there were, I will not make any names but there were some people present there that was supposedly contacting the other side, and I was disappointed, really. It's like ask the typical, you use this Barnum statements. You say things that are so general that they will fit for at least half of the people present in the room, and is there a person here with a name starting with the G? Of course, the John will be in every kind of so and that kind of things, So that is party games for me. But I will not say that it is impossible. But wherever there is cheese, there are rats also. So it's difficult. But I think.
Well put.
Very well.
But if you that is some of the miracle of things, becoming to know yourself better. You will recognize vibes in other person as well, so if you're starting to somehow tune in to your own vibes, I think your own compass will become better. So it will be more easy to navigate. I'm generally a skeptic about gurus, people going with t-shirts with the gurus and all that kinds, and have a house altar. So it might be helpful, but it can also be a power game. So, and the guru will have your money and all that kind of things. So tuning into your own intuition, become very aware of your own vibes, and starting to somehow maneuver by the information you gain there, I think you will be able to discern whether or not you should deal with this kind of mediumship or whatever, because you can also get chaotic. People can be unjustly impressed. Oh, this great psychic told me much about my grandfather. How could he possibly do that? He must be in contact with my grandfather, and the grandfather said that the heritage should go to this person, which happened to be the wife of the guru, and whatever, So that he could be downloading information from the mental internet, and that could be the explanation for why he has all this information, and then he could use that information for manipulative causes. So you should not be unduly impressed by people doing these things. I've seen, you can go to YouTube, I will not make names, people have to find out for themselves, but you can see famous psychics that are really bogus, but others I think are real. So you have to calibrate your own intuition, and that will help you navigate this quite complicated field.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's always people looking for attention out there, or your money
Mhm.
in particular.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
And they might be what I call honest liars. They think they have these abilities, but somehow they want, as you said, the attention, or they can be ego or vanity, or kind of that. And it might not be directly evil, but it's not necessarily what you need. As I said, find some tradition, sound, say, transpersonal therapist, or say Buddhist tradition, or where they really say, that's a famous quote for Khalil Gibran. He the Lebanese writer, wrote this beautiful book, The Prophet, and he says that yes, if a teacher is really wise, he or she will lead you to the threshold of your own wisdom. And I think that is somehow a touchstone here. If you somehow feel empowered, that you rely more on yourself and your own, say, perception of what is right and wrong, and your own balance is strengthened, then it's a good thing. But if the power will rest with the guru, then you're on the wrong track.
Well put. Well put. And I love the terminology, the mental internet.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's excellent.
I like that as well.
Gives a great visual of how we're all tied together and all.
I feel it a very helpful metaphor, because somehow it explains to we have this experience every day, how information can be transferred of a great distance, like in an instant, and also how information is stored, really. And I think it's quite like this collective sphere is working. And as I also write in the chapter 9, then I use the works of the great British biologist Rupert Sheldrake, and he thinks evolution is also dependent on that mechanism, because this information field is gaining more and more information over the years. I'm not a new Earth creationist, just to put it that way, but I believe there might be, say, spiritual aspects to it. But that's the mechanism of things, is probably that these, what he called morphic fields, are becoming more and more complex, more and more, say, filled with information during the say millions of years, and then it will be able to say produce more and more complex say forms of organism and consciousness from the amoeba in the primordial sea to us. It's an extreme long evolution, and it's different. Rupert Sheldrake say is a Anglican Christian, but he thinks that somehow this is the mechanism in nature by which evolution. He is not say anti-evolution, but he is not a Darwinist. Yeah.
Well, that's really fascinating because we've only been on the planet for a very short period of time in the scheme of how long we think the planet has existed, right? So evolution is such a slow process within that. If we have these kind of latent abilities that maybe were handy in a tribal sense, knowing what the other tribes were doing,
yes,
maybe we've repressed them for that because we've become a larger society, or maybe we're just on the crest of opening those things up.
That's of course a big question. Rudolf Steiner, this say founder of anthroposophy, he said that he thought that if you go back many thousand years ago, more or less everybody was clairvoyant in a say unconscious and primitive way, and then you have to develop civilization, you have to develop mathematics, for instance, and say natural science as we know it. But at a certain point, which is our days, Rudolf Steiner taught, then you have to say open the connection with the spiritual world. But then it will be an informed and conscious decision where you expand as say individuals and also the humanity as a whole. But it will be a totally different from say the more childlike we had many thousand years ago. So to have a say just living in being one with the world of spirits is different from having an active conscious and dealing with it and say like a philosopher would do, which is what Steiner hoped to do. He's called it the spirit of the science, his anthroposophy. So he did not feel that the clairvoyance itself was neither bad or good. It's just there. And the earlier generation, far back, they did not use it very consciously, but we have the possibility to train ourselves in a much more. So it's a kind of forced development. But it's so big questions this, and he thought that at a certain time, the whole Earth will somehow level up in a higher spiritual dimension. I cannot say yes, so it's exciting, but yeah.
Is there, now that we're on this topic, do you feel that there's a conflict between the paranormal, the belief in paranormal, and the belief in science?
Definitely not. My book, this, as I show you, I must use the opportunity to show it to the viewers here.
Absolutely.
Everything paranormal. Terje Simonsen. The first version of this book was released on a little English company, in fact, with office in Italy, and that publishing called Pare Publishing, and that publishing house was started by a quantum physicist. He also have written about synchronicities, meaningful coincidences organized from the say subconscious level. And his name was David Peat, and he has worked together earlier with Sir Roger Penrose, who won the Nobel Prize in Physics last year. So I see no opposition. But what I do see, but the problem is, if you have fallen in love with a model of science that is reductionist, that can be a problem, of course, because then your model, if say you have a model of space and time that excludes phenomena like telepathy and clairvoyance from happening, well, of course, then it follows that every story about these phenomena must be bogus, of course. So the problem is not science as such, but people have unduly fallen in love with, say, outdated models of science. And, it's the expression being more Catholic than the Pope, especially people following the Isaac Newton tradition, he himself was very open to the spiritual, and he's written more about alchemy and Christian prophecies than about normal science, really. But say the
Right.
tradition after Newton has been very close to this. But after the quantum physics early in the 20th century entered the stage, then it was somehow much more possible to be open against to these phenomena. And I quote several Nobel Prize winners. Wolfgang Pauli, he was a quantum pioneer, and he won the Nobel Prize in physics in 1945, and he has also written about magic, a bit like Dean Radin nowadays, but he, as I said, was a Nobel laureate. And also today I like to refer to Brian Josephson, who is a professor in Cambridge. He won the Nobel Prize in physics in 1973 on superconductivity, and he also have been doing, at least when he was younger, he was doing lots of transcendental meditation, the teachings of the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And also he has been very inspired by Vedanta philosophy. And if you go to his website on Cambridge University, you will find writings about telepathy, for instance, and psychokinesis. As I said, so he is a great scientist, but also very open to the spiritual. So basically no problem, but the problem is if you have closed models that will not allow for phenomena.
Yeah, Newtonian physics is like a box around a lot of the scientific community, and they have a hard time breaking through that. And I think a lot of the general population has a little trouble wrapping their heads around quantum physics as well. You know, we all kind of need like a starter's guide to quantum physics.
Right.
But, you know, from what I understand, you know, the crux of it, when you look at things like the double slit experiments, is that our thoughts are just very looking at something can change an intention, change reality, you know.
Or say, as Jung and Paulus said, that deep down that we make the division between consciousness and this outer object. Deep down is a unity. You know, it's Advaita philosophy, that non-duality. Deep down, it's two sides of the same coin. The observer and the observed. It's more our limited perception of things that somehow make a sharp distinction there. So that is. And also, perhaps this twin photon experiment. Should I give a short recapitulation of that?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It has been done in many laboratories. If you if you collide two electrons in kind of cyclotron, it's called, like they have in CERN in Switzerland, and different kinds of accelerator. So you collide two electrons, and from that collision it rises two photons, particles of light, that hurtles off in totally opposite directions. And when that has happened, these photons are still connected. So if you measure them 10,000 yards away, then one say going up, the other twin photon will go down at the same moment. And if the one go to the right, the other will go to the left. And if the first go down, then the second one will go up. You know, so they are connected, even if say at a distance. In our normal view of space, we will say they are far away from each other, but from the perspective of say the photons, they are connected as a unity still. So if you think that maybe also consciousness deep down is a kind of non-local phenomenon like this, because the normal say view of space do not say is not valid for these photons typically. So might this also be the case for consciousness? I think so, and Brian Josephson thinks so, and many great physicists think so. Of course, mainstream does not think so. They will say, oh, that is just for photons, not for consciousness, and so that, of course, up for debate. It's moot so far, but at least it's a possibility. And if you're into science now, I like to refer people to an article that was released in American Psychologist. American Psychologist is the most prestigious journal in the world as for psychology. And in 2018, in the May issue, there was an article about parapsychological phenomena, and it's called The Experimental Evidence for Parapsychological Phenomena Review, and it's written by a professor. He is a Mexican, but he's been tenured in Sweden, and he's also been what is called having kind of scholarship from great American universities, Etzel Cardania. So if people check out this article, they will get some ideas about how to say view consciousness in light of quantum physics. So that's an excellent article, and as I said, published in one of the most, not even just one of the most, perhaps the most prestigious journal in the world in psychology. So when that kind of journal takes in this stuff, and they of course are neutral as for if this is like, if it is like this or so, but at least it's a very valid approach that consciousness might also have a non-local dimension, and that might be the explanation of phenomena like telepathy and clairvoyance and these all other psi phenomena.
It's multidimensional.
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly.
I tend to believe that, and we are definitely going to look that up.
Yes, I wrote it all down.
Noted that.
Yes,
So
yes.
we will look at that. I would love
And
to read that. We'd enjoy that quite a bit.
It's
It's actually in the
Oh,
book.
it's in the
It's
book.
short here history of nearly everything paranormal,
Yes.
which can be found on Amazon, folks.
Mm.
I did put a link there in our ticker, but probably the easiest way is to search for that on Amazon, and that, I'm sure that'll pop right up for you. We'll be getting a copy, and we appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
The indigenous people seem in general to be more open to paranormal than us Westerners.
Yes.
Is this because of superstition? And this also goes back into other cultures too, like in Romania. They apparently still have a vampire problem in Romania. And these people that are very superstitious. What are your thoughts on that? Or what are the reasons?
Well, I think it's of course it's several things, but just say to make mention a trivial thing, that is indigenous people in the traditional milieu usually is having a kind of more quiet lifestyle. It's not big cities, you know, with honking on the cars and lots of television and noise every place. So if you say have a Sami herding his reindeer out on the tundra, you know, and being alone in the winter night, and it's just him and the reindeer in the snow. Of course, that silence will make you much more sensitive and able to pick up vibes, both of physical vibes, you know, and signals from nature, but also I think psi vibes. So I think the lifestyle might account for quite a lot of this. And then you have the traditions, because if you have a tradition that say these phenomena are just bogus, as I said, if you have place and model that these phenomena cannot occur, of course you are likely to dismiss them or overlook them when they happen. But the Sami tradition, which the Sami are living in the north of Norway and Finland and Sweden, mostly in Norway, but also Sweden and Finland, and they have a strong tradition for taking, say, care of and heeding the advice from these kind of vibes. So you have both the lifestyle and the culture that somehow predisposes for being open to. And just as musicality, if you start to develop on the guitar, for instance, then you suddenly, then I can make that chord this way. And so you start to develop into that. And the Sami tradition has a very rich, say, culture on these phenomena. So as I said, lifestyle and culture will account for quite a lot. Superstition, of course, there are superstitions as well, but as I said, related to the phenomena of telepathy, clairvoyance and precognition, which I think is very real and accounted for also by science. I give several examples from laboratories in my book. I think it's more the milieu and the culture that will explain that they have more of these phenomena.
You know, they had reason to be concerned, certainly. You know, in those tribal forms, and even like the colonial times, you know, in the U.S. and overseas, there was a lot of reason to be afraid of what was in the woods, right?
Oh yes. So and that is how it's used for many, say, indigenous people around the world, and also in modern, more modern, the Roma people. What I think they prefer that designation, or usually earlier called gypsies, have a very strong tradition for these phenomena because they was met with suspicion. They were thrown out of this village and have to travel to another place, and so very important to have extremely good intuition because what could be around the next corner.
Yeah, especially being so nomadic.
Yeah.
Yes, and my it's called chiropractor or chiropractor.
Chiropractor,
Yes.
yes, that's right.
Chiropractor, yes. I had some back problems some years ago and went to a chiropractor, and he had us on his T-shirt, on the back on his T-shirts, there was a kind of what is called this skeleton inside the back. This what is called
Fine.
this. This is spine, exactly. And it was a spine, and it stood. It was written under "Use it or lose it." And I think that's like this phenomena as well. Intuition. If you use it, it will develop. If you not, you could lose it. Yes.
True. Practice.
Yes. And as I said, a friend of mine, he is partly a gypsy and partly another kind of traveler, and his mother is say this kind of gypsy fortune teller, and it's a culture. You learn it from your say a kid how to read the signs and the tea leaves and the crystal bowl and all that.
And sure, a lot of that will go back to belief systems too. Like you mentioned, Crowley and people like that kind of give a stigma to the idea of sorcery or the use of magic, right? Magic with a K, as he defined it. But these things go back, centuries back to the Sumerians used magic and actually had spells and things of that nature, and would infuse their gods into their clay statues, and it treat them as gods. And that seemed to be, at least in our history that we know of, the beginnings of it.
It's very interesting. Divinatoric means, and I also studied old tradition from the Middle East also, and they have a tradition in Babylonia. Then you have a bowl of water, and if you pour oil in that, they make kind of patterns, and that patterns in the oil on water to interpret that pattern. That is an old means of divination. And
that's
also
interesting.
yes, very interesting. And you also, there is burned knuckles, and also there's a tradition in North Africa where you use patterns in the sand. So it's more like having a screen where it's possible to project your images that might contain information from, say, telepathy and clairvoyance and precognition. So exactly what screen or canvas you use for that is not, in my view, so important, because there are so many. But it's somehow important to get the pictures out from from your inside and to see them in a tarot cards, or in the tea leaves, or in the oil and water, or in the liver, in the sacrificial animals and all that kind of things. So it's finding, say, what is called say helpful screens where it's easy to project these images, and learning that, for instance, scrying, learning to use a crystal bowl and learning to project, because within the crystal bowl there is no picture at all. So when you start seeing picture in the crystal bowl, it's obviously they come from inside you. So but to learn that say process of projection, that is a skill that you can develop.
It's all reading those same impressions, and it's whether any form of divination can work.
Yes.
It's just a matter of tuning into those frequencies, if you will, or seeing that symbolism in your head. If you're staring at the crystal ball and you're tripping out on let your mind be open to the impressions, which I think is a big part of it, right?
Yes.
Then you'll start to get those symbols.
Exactly. And someone, as I said, they will be much more likely to get good results with the pendulum, and because they are not very visual, perhaps, but they have the same, say, sensitivity. But and some others, they are, say, hearing voices, or again, the most simple, the gut feeling, which is some an experience I think more or less everybody has. But it's somehow learn to relate to these impressions by means or directly. That is a very interesting task, and I think I'm improving myself, even if I'm not a, say, excellent scryer yet. So,
Would you say that some people are born with like a greater level of this ability or an innate ability for psychic reading, as opposed to that? But I'm sorry, I'm saying that wrong. That everybody has it. It just maybe needs to be developed. So somebody could be born and they just really happen to be extraordinary at reading.
This Norwegian psychic that passed away, I will just do a little adjustment here. The Norwegian psychic that passed away, the Snåsamann, I write quite a lot about him in the book. He was so excellent. He told about how he developed or discovered is better, because as you said, some people are extremely gifted from the outset. It's just like Mozart, they are from childhood already more or less developed. Of course, they can go from there and even further, but they start from a much higher level than the average person. And the Snåsamann, who passed away, Norway's most famous psychic, he told me he was ill in bed when he was a boy, and he was lying in bed for quite a long time. I think it was influenza or something like that, for 2 weeks. And suddenly, for his inner vision, he was living in rural area in Norway, and suddenly for his inner vision, he saw a brook, and it was quite far in the field, but it was a brook which he knew about it. But suddenly, for his inner vision, he saw that brook, and there was something glimmering and shining inside that brook, and he couldn't see exactly what it was, but he saw this shimmer and from the brook. And when he became well again, he went out in the forest and went to this brook and went there, and there was a golden ring.
Oh, wow.
So then he somehow discovered, he hadn't the language for it, of course, but there is something. I see things, and he became many episodes later also confirming his abilities, which, as I said, he also given demonstration for the police and the Red Cross. But that was his first, and that came spontaneous and without any, say, training.
Excellent. That's really interesting.
It is.
We started off the show talking about the disclosure in the U.S.
About
the disclosure.
Yes.
Supposedly the government is disclosing. Well, they didn't really disclose very much, but
Yes.
Information on these UAPs that we're seeing in mainstream media now.
Yes.
I just wondered what your thoughts were on that and alien or not so alien consciousness.
Well, I am quite open to this alien thing. But again, as with ghosts, I think you not should invest. That is my view, at least. You should not invest your life savings in aliens or ghosts, because it's taking away from your own center and your own life and your own responsibility for yourself and your friends and your family. But sure, thing. But I'm a bit more so I think the phenomena definitely are real, and so it was 144 cases, and they could account, say, a normal explanation for one of those, but then leaves us with 143 reports that was not able to be accounted for by, say, normal explanations. That's very, very interesting, of course. I tend to be an adherent of, probably the work of Jacques Vallée. Jacques Vallée, yes, he's a ufologist, and he is not. He thinks more of parallel dimensions than. It's not that these guys are coming from the Pleiades. He thinks he's more like parallel dimensions. So I tend to be in that camp more or less, but that the phenomena are not being able to be explained by just. Some could be government military projects or even Russian military projects, but I've seen, as probably you have also, it's zapping very fast, these things. It seems not to be the normal kind of movement. So I'm quite open to that this might be, I will not say extraterrestrials, but I more think kind of, say, parallel dimension that somehow say zapping into our dimension and then zapping back again. But it's complicated. But Jacques Vallée is the expert to go to, I think, if you are going to read some theoretical stuff about this.
Yeah, I just find it fascinating because it's topical. Yeah, I totally agree. I think they're already
Interdimensional
here.
beings, basically.
You know, they're not
Yes.
from up there. And I think as Lou Elizondo put it, you know, there's up there, there's down here, and then there's in between, which was a nice way of putting, you know, that into the context of being interdimensional. And I think that's great, because I agree, and I would agree with a lot of what Jacques Vallée has said. Yeah, very interesting.
He is, as opposed to many ufologists, or what you call them in the US, Jacques Vallée is an astronomer, and he in fact made one of the first digital maps of Mars. And he is also, as you probably know, one of the founders of the World Wide Web, and I think he has founded about 35 companies being on the NASDAQ. So he's really a genius. So it doesn't mean he is right in everything he says, but it's a very good starting point if you want to have some serious information about this highly contested field.
Absolutely. And it kind of gets back to the idea of consciousness, right? Which we're all trying to wrap our heads around. Like, what is consciousness?
Yes.
And that's where what it comes down to there.
I think so.
Yeah.
So it's theoretically it's an extremely complex question, but as you also said in the introduction here, I'm also even if I love theory, and as I said, my book is 500 pages, so there must be some theory in there. But it's also it's also practical, and how to you improve your life and improve your view of life, and you improve your view on other people, you know, and awe for nature and awe for the animals, you know. I feel it's so much in store here for say using this or opening to this field in a constructive manner.
Right. And you're right. So many people, you know, peg these things with stereotypes that it doesn't get the scientific consideration that it should. You know, it's something that's just spooky or scary, or, you know, people love to throw around the D word, demons. And we did talk about that on the show quite a bit.
Yeah.
It scares people off from doing any kind of serious research. Yet the phenomena of psychic abilities and psi and psychokinesis has been proven over time and time again in laboratories and the few places that study it. You know, not every college studies, you know, gives degrees in parapsychology or has that kind of
some universities around the world, but most do not have a parapsychology department.
Correct. But I wish there was more of it, because I think that is where we're going as a civilization, is understanding that whole segment of science.
Definitely. So Dean Radin is doing quite a good work there, and as I said, Brian Josephson also. But I think also the generation, Max Planck, he was a quantum pioneer, and he said, it's a quote that I quite often bring attention to. He said, "Science progresses funeral for funeral." So because if people are identified their whole life and understanding of the world and their career and their scholarships and their grants and their position at the university with old paradigm that says that these phenomena do not exist or cannot possibly exist, then it's difficult for them to, of course, be open to both research and stories about this and things. So but I think the newer generations of quantum physicists, you know, having a more flexible and fluid relation to space, time, and causality than the traditional Newtonian physics, then I think we got a generation that, at least in principle, will be much more open to at least doing serious research on these phenomena.
Sure, absolutely.
Right. I'd say it sounds a bit like the ancient civilizations, right?
Right.
Where they're not taken as seriously because they're driven by museum money and that kind of
thing. Yes, the pseudoscience they call it, and
the term pseudoscience are different things.
The mainstream. The mainstream won't give them money to fund them, basically.
Yes.
So
this is a problem, of course. If you're
most definitely,
kind of a parallel,
right? Like Göbekli Tepe, they don't want to give really anybody any money to even say, if they even say that it was 12,600 years old. They don't want anything like that. And that's where the pseudoscience comes in.
Of course, there's much bogus in the field of, say, crypto-cultural science and
Sure.
cryptozoology and so. But as you probably know very well, this antikythera mechanism they found.
Oh, Antikythera, yes.
Yes,
Yes.
that kind of finds suddenly. Oh, did they really have, say, analogous computers in antiquity? Yes,
Sure,
have it.
they
We have it
did.
here. So there might, and I think discoveries like that somehow will open people's mind at least to the possibilities that we may not know all about these ancient cultures. Clearly, we do not. So. Yeah.
Right.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of give and take when you say the primitive cultures are actually in a way more in tune with their psychic abilities because maybe they had to be or whatnot. But we've gotten away from that as a society and like written that off. And then now it's like a struggle to get people to look at this phenomena in a serious way. Not that the work isn't being
Well, you
done,
got to
as was
figure,
mentioned, but
yeah,
you know,
they most of the cultures, their religions, their cultures, stem from the gods in the sky. They didn't have TV, they didn't have phones or anything. That was basically in their
absolutely.
everyday
Spent a
part
lot
of
time
life.
looking at our planetary systems and seem to have known
Right.
more about it than the average person does
Yeah.
today. The way things move and be able to navigate a boat across an ocean.
Yeah.
Based on the star system, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can these phenomena be useful for in science in a way, and eventually how?
Be used for, excuse me, could you repeat, please?
I'm sorry. You just took it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. So can the phenomena, now I can't even say it, be useful? Yes.
Oh, yes. I tried to I think I said a little passage about that earlier, about the practical, when you have to make decisions. Of course, if you have better, say, a better hunch about what is the right decision, that it can be very helpful. And I in my chapter 9 in my book, I go quite deep into that, and what is normal intuition and what is, say, paranormal intuition, and are they? And I feel it's a kind of seamless synthesis between the normal and paranormal via your intuition. So, as I said, I think quite a lot of people using this already, but they just don't know what they are doing. Both successful investors, successful sports people, and in artists. Very often they will say make those spontaneous downloads without knowing, and without making any special ritual or anything. So yes, very helpful, and I think everybody ought to go more in nature and ought to start some kind of spiritual practice, doing meditation,
Absolutely.
yoga, or something.
I agree. We're in no happier place than when we're in the woods or on the beach. We love nature, and there is just some sort of spiritual energy, something that is just invigorates the soul, or if we take a ride into the mountains or something like that. We were at the beach last week, and it was just wonderful.
Heaven, heavenly.
Just feel more in tune with the world.
Yes. So search out these places that will say be your power spots, and make an active relationship with what somehow nurtures your soul. So I think it's very helpful and adds to your quality of both your personal life, but then also your surroundings, and in the big picture also us as a community. So yes.
We've got a little time left. I wanted to know about the dangers. What would be the dangers of a person getting involved in this?
Well, if you are a psychic unbalance, of course, that is a friend of mine. He has been committed to psychiatric hospital. He's schizophrenic, or at least was schizophrenic. He is doing very well now. But he asked me at a point in time, and he is very, at least kind of gifted also with telepathy and this stuff. And he gave some demonstrations of that, which was, to my mind at least convincing. So and he asked me, Terje, how can I develop these abilities further? But then I arrested him a bit and said, do you think that is really a good idea? Because if you go into a crowd and suddenly can listen to the thoughts and feelings of 7 other people and you are chaotic already, okay, that will not add to harmony and balance, of course. So I said, please, just as I said, go in the wood and do some practical stuff, chop wood and carry water, as they say in Zen Buddhism, and also feed the dog and do all the practical stuff that makes you grounded and centered. So I will not say, so to a person being already very sensitive and a bit in imbalance, that could be too much in a way. So that is one danger. Other danger is, of course, being, say, manipulated by gurus because you respect, he could read my mind and everything he says must be right and all that kind of stuff. So you become mentally slave to that person. That is very unhealthy. So that it should be always on guard for that kind of things.
Okay.
And there might be the last thing, as I used, we come back to the intention again. If you are out for power, and manipulation, and that is what you want with your life, that is not a good course of life. And as I said, if you hang out with neo-Nazis or Islamistic terrorists, and so that will somehow influence you, I think. So if you go into this field with a bad intention, that could backfire in a way. And Dean Radin, he is a scientist, but he also at the point felt that perhaps intention, it is really a power, so what you somehow connect with, if you use that intention in a bad way, I will not say that you will become possessed or anything like, but at least you're somehow going into landscape. Again, if you're surfing the net, and go to the dark web and the pages that we should not use much time on, that will influence your view on yourself and other people, So it's like that also. Don't hang out with the neo-Nazis, not on the physical plane or on the astral plane. Yeah.
Right. No,
that's where you, again, when you were talking about the vampirism,
yes,
that's actually not just a soul sucker, it's your energy sucker.
Yep.
It sucks out the energy out of it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like vampire.
And the kind of rule of like drugs, like positive drugs,
exactly,
negative.
Yeah.
It's a simple rule, but we all kind of know it. It's one of those things you almost just know. I don't know that we're even taught those things, but we just know.
Exactly.
Certainly when you go down a dark path, you're going to draw more negativity to you.
Yes. So I think you should say, if you're a Christian, start the day with a prayer. If you're a Buddhist, start with a good meditation, or if you are not if you're an atheist, go for a walk in your garden and listen to the birds, which are very real, I think. Or the cherry blossom, smell the roses, and all that kind of things. Tune into the good vibes, and that will say improve, and you will be protected and on the right track.
Do you have any advice for people just starting out to meditate?
There are so many good. Traditional Zen meditation is just observing your breathing. So without using any ideology or mantra or anything. Personally, I have used the transcendental meditation with the good results, but they can be a bit pushy. They want you to take more courses and that kind of things. But yes, so the breathing meditation is very good. And also, I had used this binaural beats. You have these soundtracks. Yes. So I tend to prefer Holosync. Bill Harris, the founder, died a couple of years ago, but Holosync is a quite good center point. It's a company, but also this Monroe Center, they have Hemisync.
Yes,
but
that's what Hemisync. I've been listening to.
Yeah,
yes, Hemisync and Holosync. But you can in fact make your own tracks also. But if you spend some dollars, you get some kind of well tested things that can be very helpful also. So, but your breathing, you have the writings of Thich Nhat Hanh, for instance, this great Zen Buddhist master. He has some small books. Thich Nhat Hanh, small books on how to meditate in everyday life. So it does not need to be complicated. It's just really training of awareness of your presence in the world and your breathing that will increase quality of life. But the books of Thich Nhat Hanh are really excellent.
Yeah. Okay,
I
we'll
wrote
look
it
into
down.
that. We're always
Yeah.
looking for it. And, I know when I started meditating, it just seemed like there was if you Google it, Dr. Google will tell you a whole lot of different ways to do it,
Yes.
and none of them, go, well, which is the right way?
It's
So it's good
preference
to ask that
basically.
question, just to say, well, yes, there are a lot of different ways out there to do it. Try some things and see what rings true to you.
But you like
And the essence of meditation really, because as I quoted my Gestalt teacher, a training of awareness of your body, awareness of your breathing, awareness of your mind, awareness of your feeling, awareness of the communication, awareness of nature. Training of awareness. That's the essence. So how to train your awareness in the best possible way? For me, I as I said, felt that these things I mentioned were helpful. But if you are drawn to a special path, of course, that I think you should check out that and what that does for you. But avoid as much guruism as possible.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. Like, we are fans of Monroe's Hemisync, and they have some of their recordings.
Yes,
we both do them. I find it fascinating, and it does kind of act. Now, we're not sponsored by them in any way. I'm not trying to push their product.
No.
It's funny.
Me neither. As I said, my favorite soundtracks are from Holosync, but I also have some Hemisyncs here.
Yeah, okay. I'm not familiar with Holosync. We're going to look into that as well.
That's you said that came from the Monroe Institute?
Hemisync is from the Monroe Institute, but Holosync, that's Center Pointer. Center Pointer, yes. Bill Harris was the founder, but he passed away some years ago.
We'll look into that, just because we're looking
Holosync. Yes, it's quite good and a series, and they also know I seem like in doing ad for them. But my experience is that their customer service was excellent. So if I wanted to evaluate my process, I get some anxiety early in the process, and I asked so and so, and I also was, will it be working if I do it that way with that kind of sound equipment and all kind of things. They were very helpful, and they were also very professional. And when I asked questions that the first customer representative was not able to, they set me to a sound engineer that really went into the technical detail about stuff. So they are highly competent. Some say they are too much about money. Could be, but at least they deliver quality for the money. So.
Sure. A good product. Yeah. That's what's important at the end of the day. Now, do those use headphones as well, like binaural beats and Hemisync?
Yes. Okay. Yes, you should use headphones, because you have to. The stereo effect is, as you probably know, technically speaking, is one frequency in one ear and other frequency in the other ear. And if you don't split, if you just have it in the room, you will not have that, because it triggers a kind of relaxation response in your brain. But you have to use, say, both channels, both ears to trigger that response.
Yeah, they're supposed to act as sort of a transcendental meditation crash course, like by opening the brain a little bit on both sides or both hemispheres of the brain. The theory is that you'll reach that state of nirvana like quicker, or have some sort of consciousness change. And I do find that we've experienced consciousness change in events with the headphones on, which is brilliant.
Yes. They might say oversell their message a bit. It's like how to meditate like a Zen master with the push of a button. It's not.
Yeah, it's not
really. Like you said, you've got to develop your own and get there.
I think those things do help. I would like to tell the listeners out there, though, that there are a lot of things on YouTube that are free, that are labeled binaural beats and different things, and you can try them. The quality may vary, so keep that in mind. If you're not getting anything from it, try some others.
Try something else.
Because just because it doesn't mean they necessarily work right, or actually tune differently in each ear and that kind of thing. Yeah.
So you should use a well-tested product that also, there's a long story this, but basically the Holosync system was based on the things that were done at the universities with gurus and Zen masters in the 70s and 80s, and somehow they tried to, say, commercialize the result from what they saw at the brain, from the brainwave patterns of these long-time meditators. So you can see that somehow the so-called frequency following response become activated if you have, say, 440 hertz in one ear and 445 in the other ear. You get a kind of discrepancy of 5 hertz, and then it will tend to trigger a 5 hertz oscillation in your brain, which is quite deep down in the theta and delta wave area, and then you get some kind of, say, sometimes some of the experiences related to that kind of brainwave function. So it's a very scientific approach, but as I said, the thing is they can oversell it, but it can be really powerful, and it helped me quite a lot, really.
And get you closer to like a sleep state. And
Yes.
that is brilliant, I think. It seems like a lot of the phenomena does happen in that kind of half awake, half asleep state,
Yes.
especially when we talk about things like remote viewing, or maybe the lucid dreaming and the dreams where you figure out what's going to happen the next day. It's
one of my chapters, at least one quite big section of the book, is about the dream telepathy, because it has been observed. It also researched at the Maimonides Hospital in New York for 10 years in the 60s and 70s by Professor Stanley Krippner, who has been the chairman of 2 departments of the American Psychological Association. And he concluded that dreams are very beneficial for telepathic exchange between people, because somehow you lower the threshold. And usually when we are now on beta, we're quite active mentally, and so we filter out much of these subtle impression. But when we relax, we are more open and more receptive, and can take in more of these subtle vibes. So and in fact, I was quite proud, because Professor Krippner has used my chapter in his education, so I like that.
That's amazing.
That's excellent. And the book, again, is A Short History of Nearly Everything Paranormal. You want to hold it up there? There we are. And looks fascinating. We're ordering it, and I'm sorry I didn't have it in time for the show, but I will be ordering this book.
Yes.
And we'll be putting it on the bookcase there, and probably feature it through some of our episodes, because it's totally fascinating. I've totally enjoyed the conversation.
And if you like the book, I would love if you also made a little note on Amazon.
Absolutely.
I am low budget, I don't have money to pay for big ads in the bookstores, and so if people help me with a little positive note on Amazon, I'm very grateful for that.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
We will do that. We will do that.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
You're very welcome.
Absolutely. And thank you so much again for taking time out of your evening. There you are.
I love talking to you, talking with positive, interesting people, so thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. We'll do this again. We're looking forward to the book. The book again, A Short History of Nearly Everything Paranormal.
And we have next week, I was going to say, we have Kaz and the people from the Pentrick incident.
That's right.
Kaz Clark and Gary Jones.
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you again. We appreciate it.
And be well out there. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, folks, that's all the time we have. We do have Kaz Clark coming on next week, so stick around. And there we go. We see people ordering the book as we speak. Thank you, Robert Honings. Yes, I am serious about getting it. We will getting it as well. So that's all we've got time for today. Thank you for watching Bigfoot and the Bunny. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.